because man's task is to make the earth after the model of heaven. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Man's project is to heavenize the earth. Man is made to transform the world from glory to glory, to take hold of it and break it down and remake it after the image of heaven.
Welcome back to the Reformed Reset. My name is Grant, and joined with me is my beautiful wife, Ericha, the weaker vessel.
Hello, everyone.
Guys, on this episode of The Deep Weird, we're going to talk about ghosts in the Bible, aliens, and cryptids. But before we get into it, subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit the like button, leave a comment, subscribe in your podcast catcher, wherever you're listening to this. Leave us a 5-star review. Apple Podcasts. I mean, that helps out podcasts a ton when you do that kind of a thing. And check out the description below for links to our merch store, our website, social media accounts where you can follow us, and our Christmas Advent family devotional, Behold Your King, that Ericha and I wrote with our good friends Scotty and Sondra Rowlett. It is available on Amazon, EzraPress.ca, and wherever books are sold.
Hopefully.
And you can financially support us on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/takeholdstudios, and you guys can support us there. It's a huge help to just keep this train moving down the tracks.
Yeah.
So if you do that, that'd be awesome, guys. Also, share our stuff with a friend. That is a huge way to spread our content. So if you find it beneficial and helpful, share it on your social media account, send it in a Facebook message to a friend, say, hey, I thought this was really helpful, thought you might like it, or whatever. And word of mouth is one of the best ways to promote something. So if you guys do that, we are super grateful, and it would help us out a ton. So anyway, that's enough.
Good times.
Of all of the announcement business things. Time to get back to the Deep Weird.
Okay, Deep Weird.
Hope you guys are enjoying this series in this wonderful month of October. We're having fun.
We are having fun.
It's a lot of fun.
We love this stuff. This is a lot of fun. This is different content than what Christians usually, put out maybe, but
yeah,
we enjoy it.
I mean, Christian, Big Eva culture is all like, light colors and happy thoughts and stuff, and we're the ones like, let's take on the armies of darkness.
Oh, this is like the Helm's Deep of podcast content here. Like, we're in the thick of it, right?
So I was showing the kids the other day, I can't remember why they asked about it, but it goes along with the month of October and deep weirdness. But there's an old Christian metal band from California called Impending Doom.
Very epic name.
And I just showed them a song, and the kids are just like, what is this? It's really funny. Their comments about that sort of thing is always entertaining to me, which is why I show it to them.
Okay.
But they were like, they're just so angry and stuff. I was like, no, he's singing about Jesus. He's happy. He's a happy guy.
He's a happy guy.
Just a screaming himself into the microphone. Anyway, this episode...
We've already gotten that far off the rails, so that's going to be...
All right.
It's going to be good. We got to get our minds in track. Okay, so...
Yeah.
Today, we are going to talk about ghosts, and we're going to talk about aliens and cryptids.
It's going to be a wonderful time.
We kind of talked about ghosts in the last episode.
Like in general.
In this episode, we're going to zoom in a little bit on like biblical ghosts.
So, I know we talked about the Bible referencing spiritual powers, and we see the New Testament frequently mention principalities and powers, and right. What we're talking about is actual people coming back from the dead and making physical appearances.
And I think something that needs to be said before we start talking about this stuff is that the Bible talks about a lot of really weird stuff that we just believe at face value, even though it doesn't make much sense to us.
To a naturalist view of the world, it makes no sense.
No, and it can't be real, right?
Right.
But then, like, we believe as Christians that the Red Sea was, basically
Literally split in two.
Yeah, it was split in two, and we believe that women were turned into salt, and we believe that people were resurrected from the dead, and we believe, like, there's just so many crazy things that a virgin could conceive and give birth.
Right.
Does not make any sense.
Yeah.
This does not make sense.
To scientism.
But we believe it by faith because we believe in that, God's word is true.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it comes to passages that are hard to understand, sometimes it is helpful to just remember, like, think about this one weird story as a part of a whole bunch of other weird stories.
True.
That somehow make up truth.
Right. No, that's a very good way to put it, babe. And it's like even creation itself, right? All of this world that we live in coming out of nothing. Mm-hmm. It's not hard to believe if you presuppose the existence of God. Right. So if you presuppose that, him turning a woman, Lot's wife, into a pillar of salt's not weird. Him flooding the earth and it's not weird.
Right.
Splitting the Red Sea, all these things are not weird.
Well, because he spake everything into existence, which is pretty weird too.
He can do whatever.
He can do whatever he wants.
With it, yeah.
So the first, or I shouldn't say the first ghost we see. One of the first ghosts we see, I just don't know. Anyway, that's a different story. Is the witch via the witch at Endor.
Right, it has to do with the whole episode of the witch at Endor.
Yes.
So King Saul, interesting character, starts out well in his time as king over Israel, and then quickly his rule degrades, and he's a very insecure man, and he does not trust the Lord. And so then that devolves into all sorts of wicked practices. One of them trying to make David wall decor. That's one of them.
Taxidermy.
And David's like, not a fan of this. I'm going to go leave and run away.
Yeah.
And then that just drives Saul even more crazy. And
it's so funny because it was Saul's own son who loved David.
Yeah.
Right.
That probably drove him crazy more
Besties.
too. Yeah, they were really close. And which was huge for Jonathan, right? Because he was heir to the throne.
Yeah.
But for him to hand his armor over,
Yeah.
it's really cool. But Saul had, obviously, the God's law. We joked about it. Suffer thee not a witch to live. And Saul was putting to death sorceresses and whoever within his kingdom. But Saul also, because he didn't like the words of the prophets, he had slain all the prophets and driven them from the land. And so Saul had essentially cut himself off from hearing from the Lord, period. Mm-hmm. So then Samuel comes to him and tells him, hey man, the Lord's done with you. We're going to, David's the man. Mm-hmm. Which that drove Saul crazy too. Then the Philistines are coming up against Saul. And before you go to war, the kings of Israel would inquire of the Lord, right? You have the Urim and the Thummim that the priests would have. He drove them out. So he had no Urim and Thummim. He had no prophets, no one to help him out. Well, Saul's great plan is to go to a witch.
It's to disobey God, because that's going to go better.
Yeah, because that'll go better. And what he wants is he wants Samuel back. Samuel was this prophet that would give him the word, and so he wants Samuel back. So then, picking up the story in 1 Samuel 28, verse 11, it says this. Then said the woman, talking about the witch of Endor, to Saul, whom shall I bring up unto thee? And he said, bring me up Samuel. And when the woman saw Samuel, she cried with a loud voice. And the woman spake to Saul, saying, why hast thou deceived me? For thou art Saul. So somehow she knew she saw through his disguise now. Mm-hmm. And the king said unto her, be not afraid, right? Because he'd been putting them all to death. He's like, I'm not going to kill you. Be not afraid, for what sawest thou? And the woman said unto Saul, I saw gods ascending out of the earth. And he said unto her, what form is he of? And she said, an old man cometh up, and he is covered with a mantle. That was the prophet's mantle.
Okay.
It was like a stole that they wore.
Okay.
And Saul perceived that it was Samuel, and he stooped with his face to the ground and bowed himself. And Samuel said to Saul, Samuel's been dead for a while now, why hast thou disquieted me to bring me up? And Saul answered, I am sore distressed, for the Philistines make war against me, and God is departed from me. You did it to yourself. And answereth me no more, neither by prophets, because you drove them all out, nor by dreams. Therefore I have called thee, that thou mayest make known unto me what I shall do. Then said Samuel, Wherefore then dost thou ask of me, seeing the Lord is departed from thee, and is become thine enemy? And the Lord hath done to him as he spake by me. For the Lord hath rent the kingdom out of thine hand, and given it to thy neighbor, even to David. Because thou obeyedst not the voice of the Lord, nor executedst his fierce wrath upon Amalek, therefore hath the Lord done this thing unto thee this day. Moreover, the Lord will also deliver Israel with thee into the hand of the Philistines, and tomorrow shalt thou and thy sons be with me. The Lord also shall deliver the host of Israel into the hand of the Philistines. Then Saul fell straightway all along on the earth, and was sore afraid because of the words of Samuel, and there was no strength in him, for he had eaten no bread all the day, nor all the night.
So we have had people ask us to cover this story in the Bible, and there's much controversy surrounding whether or not that really was Samuel, whether it was a demon. How could a witch bring back someone who's dead? And then there were questions surrounding if it's possible to even communicate with someone who has passed into eternity. Anyway, great questions, I think.
Very good question.
Fair questions. It's not normal. This is why we were talking about when you read Bible stories that are weird, sometimes it's just okay to acknowledge, yeah, this is a really weird one.
Yep.
This is not normal.
Yep. Nope.
This is not a normal thing that happens. It's so rare, in fact, that it's never recorded again, as far as I know.
Right.
Like, there aren't any other stories of people conjuring and bringing people back from the dead.
Right.
That doesn't happen again.
No, not to my knowledge.
So rare, like it happened once. The interesting thing that I find is that the prophet says that Saul and his sons will be with him the following day.
Right.
Which lends me to believe that it is actually Samuel.
Right. From the realm of the dead.
From the realm of the dead, which would have been Abraham's bosom.
Sheol.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sheol is the common word in the Old Testament for the place of those who have departed.
Yeah.
Good and bad.
Yeah.
Sheol. Yeah, I think that's a great indication that this is in fact Samuel. They all recognized him. He has the prophet's mantle that stole, that Elijah and Elisha, passed on. That was what he whipped the water with, and and so you have all these markers to tell you who it is.
Right.
I think that part of what's happening is kind of. You find it in some other places too, but it's almost God, like Romans 1, handing you over. You want it so bad, I'm just going to hand it to you then. Right? You want to disobey me so bad. You want no word from the Lord, that you seek the witch. Okay, then let's do it. But all it's going to do is add to your judgment.
Yep.
Right? The people of Israel in the wilderness begged for meat. Can we please have meat? This bread, this manna, yuck. And what did God do? He made birds miraculously fall out of the sky and just fall into the camp. And they gorged themselves and made themselves sick. Right? So it's like God, God has this point where he uses that thing that we're sinfully wanting so bad to add to our judgment, add to our own. So that would be, back up. God is the one who did this, not the witch.
Yeah, right.
right? I remember you and I talking about this and reading this some years ago, and just noticing, like, she screams.
Yeah.
So it's not like same old day for the old witch of Endor.
No.
Like, she wasn't expecting it to happen this way.
Something different happened. Like, she probably contacted other demonic things before, but whatever happened this time was certainly different. I
mean, it's got to be creepy if the witch is startled.
Yeah, that's not a good sign, man.
That's not a good sign. That's probably what got Saul even more worked up, too.
Yeah.
If she's freaked out, then...
That's not a good sign, man.
But, she didn't know. And then she was mad at him. What are you doing? Right? Yeah. You're a Saul. You're tricking me.
Well, funny that, like, he goes to try and manipulate the situation.
Yeah.
And, I don't know, incur favor with the Lord by disobeying God. And the penalty for that type of sorcery would have been death.
Mm-hmm.
So he's like, I'm gonna pull a death penalty kind of crime here and see if God will be nice to me by manipulating Samuel to bend God's ear. Like, I don't know what I'm genuinely curious to know someday what that whole thing was about.
Yeah.
But how many times do we do that as Christians, right? Like, we think we can just scoot around the rules a little bit to try and incur favor with the Lord. Like, maybe this isn't technically the right thing to do, but I have a good motivation.
I have good intentions.
Yeah, so it's fine. Like, this is the ultimate version of that.
You think you have good intentions,
but you don't.
Yeah. Well, and God did kill him the next day.
Yep. God won't be mocked.
So Saul did get the right punishment for sorcery.
And his sons.
God did not suffer us all to live.
Well, and that is the interesting part. Like, obviously, we believe in covenantalism.
Right.
Obviously, like, we believe in patriarchy. We believe in headship. We believe in all these things. And it's interesting when in the story because his sons and his line...
Jonathan's one of them.
Yeah, is brought down because of the sin of the father.
And this fits with the covenantal language in the Old Testament that the sins of the father will be visited upon up to the third and fourth generation.
Right.
And it's not that, because the Old Testament says otherwise in other places, it's not that Jonathan was guilty of sorcery.
No.
God is not going to put him before the throne and say, Jonathan, why did you... No, my dad. We're told in the Old Testament that sons shall not pay for the sins of their fathers. So the judges of Israel wouldn't, or the elders and stuff, couldn't go to Jonathan and say, well, your father committed this crime, and so we're going to put you to death.
Right.
That would be unjust. But God covenantally has instituted in the way that the world works that the sins of a father will trickle down. What's cool, though, and merciful, is that it's only to the third and fourth generation, whereas for those who walk with God and obey his commands, he will bless them to 1,000 generations. Right? So God obviously leans way more heavy on the blessing side. Peter Lightheart in his 1st and 2nd Kings commentary said, when you read these stories, you almost seems like God's mercy is indulgent. Like, it's almost like he just can't help himself but be merciful.
Right.
And it's true. He has such a long wick with us. And Saul just met the end of it.
Well, Saul was a shyster as well, so...
You read the story. Saul's horrible.
Yeah, he really was not a fun guy.
He's mean to everybody. He's not nice to anyone. He will not listen to anybody. He's like really disobedient against God in the worst ways.
It's funny because it's like the natural state of like a terrible leader. Like, you could just...
Yeah.
It's such a Saul move, right?
Yeah.
Like, you look at these terrible leaders, spiritual leaders, bad pastors. It's such a Saul move most of the time.
You were saying when we were doing pre-production in our meeting, that isn't it just like our leaders today, where the rules are only for thee, not for me.
Yeah.
Right? He outlawed witches and all that kind of stuff, but then he can go, and that's not a problem. Be not afraid. That's fine.
Yeah.
For when I do it, it's not a big deal.
Right.
But
it's like, if Bill Clinton can ride in Epstein's planes to his island, that's fine.
Yeah.
No one's going to question those sorts of things, right? Anyway, sidebar, but...
Totally hypocritical, but yeah.
Very hypocritical.
Um,
Also, this is a caution for a lot of leaders too, is that you can have an appearance of godliness, right? Like, oh, I'm going to outlaw the witches.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna make sure that they're all put to death.
That's a very good point.
You know, so like if you're a spiritual leader and you are doing things for appearance sake, but secretly in your heart you're harboring some kind of desire, just know like it'll be found out.
Well, how often is
it'll affect your sons.
Yeah. How often is politics that way, where it just throws some breadcrumbs to that party or that group or something because it's just what they like, not out of actual righteousness. But then you use that against them when you want to pass your wicked bill or your whatever over here. And you're like, well, we just exchanged favors. That's not good.
Right.
Not good at all. Is there more about the witch?
There's another ghost story. You want to talk about the other ghost story?
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
So the other one, guys, is right after the...
This is probably the lesser known of the ghost stories.
This one's a little harder to get some...
commentary on.
But in Matthew 27, starting in verse 50, says this: Jesus, when he had cried again with a loud voice, yielded up the ghost. And behold, the veil of the temple was rent in twain. I love the old King James sometimes. From the top to the bottom, and the earth is from heaven down. It's cool. And the earth did quake, and the rocks rent, and the graves were opened, and many bodies of the saints which slept arose, and came out of the graves after his resurrection, and went into the holy city, Jerusalem, and appeared unto many.
So think about that for a second. Like, I read this, like, I don't know, a few months back, and I had never thought about this or read it. I mean, I'm sure I read it, but it never like clicked in my brain. After the resurrection, people were also bodily resurrected.
Saints.
Yeah, the saints were.
Yeah.
And walked around Jerusalem.
And said, yeah, the holy city.
Like,
yeah, that's
either like a zombie or a ghost, right?
Well, I'd say it's like Lazarus, who was resurrected.
Right.
You know?
But the world would call it a zombie or a ghost.
Sure. Yeah. Definitely. It's weird. Like, that's one of those
so
passages.
Weird.
That's one of those passages I keep saying, like, once we get there, we hit the turbo. We just go really fast, and then we hope nobody noticed it or that my mind is bothered by it. But why don't we have any other conversation about it? Why don't we?
I don't know. When I read that a few months back, like, you and I kind of were trying to find commentary on it too, and we couldn't find anything. So if you guys have some, let us know.
Yeah,
We'd be interested.
I would love to hear some explanations of
obviously
what went on there.
These are saints. We don't think it's demonic or anything weird like that.
Right.
It like clearly says they're saints, and then they went into the holy city. Just such a strange story.
with no deep dive study into it, this is what I think.
Okay.
I think no one thought it was weird because Jesus also just resurrected, and everyone was just taking a moment to deal with that.
Yeah.
And then he ascended, and those other people just eventually died or whatever, witnesses to the the apostles were witnesses to the resurrection. And there was these other people seemingly too. We have no idea how many.
Right.
If it was 500, I don't know.
We don't know.
But
we know it's, a couple at least, right?
Yeah. Well, and you and I, babe, we don't want to just spiritualize it. Like, we don't want to.
I think it's dangerous to spiritualize it, because if you do, people could spiritualize the resurrection of Christ too.
Well, that's inserted kind of in a weird spot, because then it talks about him being buried and on and on and on, and then in 28, then it's actually Sunday and he's resurrected, and so it's kind of like thrown in there, but it does say after the resurrection.
It does say after the resurrection. Mm-hmm.
But if you just spiritualize it, then what's stopping you from spiritualizing the earthquake, the rocks being rent into, the veil in the temple rent into? I mean, how far are you going to go? Jesus.
I don't think you can spiritualize it. I think that would be incredibly irresponsible.
I think the biggest question for me was just, why does it not seem to be there's a bigger fuss about it? Or like
maybe it's just because Christ was also resurrected, and that's the bigger deal, right? Like, these people
weren't claiming to be God,
aren't the first fruits of the resurrection. Like, it's cool and stuff, but like Christ,
maybe it made sense. Maybe they were like, oh, that makes sense.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So, but like, basically both of these ghost stories in the Bible, you have to believe because it says it happened.
Right.
But these are just kind of ones where like you just sort of scratch your head and you're like, well, that's weird. Right. That's deep weird.
That's deep.
That's deep weird right there.
Oh, that's deep weird.
You know, it's cool. I don't know. It's cool.
I agree. And we shouldn't settle for cop-out answers as Christians, because that's how the pagans win, is when we settle for cop-out answers. So,
well, and what we're not saying is that because Saul consulted with a witch, or that after the resurrection people arose bodily and walked around Jerusalem, that can happen today. Mm-hmm. We're not saying that. We're not saying that like ghosts are just popping out of the ground, zombies are popping out of the ground, that's normal, and because the Bible says it can happen, so it can happen all the time. No, not at all.
No, this was in a passage listing effects of this moment.
Yep.
The veil being torn, rocks splitting, earthquake, all this kind of stuff, and then that's mentioned too. So obviously Matthew, as he's coming to the end of his gospel, is just laying it on like this was a huge moment, and here's some things
physiological
problems,
physiological things that happened
that
like
tell you how big of a deal
things responded to a spiritual reality.
Yeah. Right.
I guess.
Yeah.
Anyway,
and we believe our bodies are going to be resurrected one day anyway, so I don't know why it would even be that alarming for us that it happened. Again, you made a really good point. They're not the first fruits. It says after Jesus resurrected. And we know that he's the first fruits, and that will follow after him. So there you go.
Sure. Yeah. Anyway. Weird, right?
Yep.
If you never knew that was in your Bible, now you do.
Bible's fun, isn't it?
It is fun. And like the more you read it, the more you catch little things like that. And you're like, I have read my Bible before, but why did I never catch that particular story? Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because there's just so much in there. Anyway, it's really good. So anyway, there's real ghost stories in the Bible, guys.
A couple of pretty solid ghost stories.
If you want to call that a ghost story, I think you could call it a ghost story.
The world would, right? I think you made a good point there. Yeah. Yeah,
the world would call it a ghost story.
All right.
Okay, so another topic that kind of in the similar vein. Mm-hmm. Speaking of spooky weirdness.
Yeah.
Is talking about aliens and also cryptids. Do you think we should just do a third one?
We could.
We can.
We've talked long enough on that.
I don't want to stop talking.
Yeah. No, let's just stop it.
So we'll have to keep recording.
Yeah.
Because I feel like my brain's on fire.
Okay, so let me do an ending.
In a good way, guys.
Let's end it, and then we got aliens coming up.
Okay.
Sounds good?
Okay.
All right. Till next time, take hold to reorder creation by first reforming your home and suffer thee not a witch to live. This is the Reformed Reset.
But on the basis of grace and on the finished work of Jesus Christ, the project is back and forth, and the destiny of a new transformed world is assured.
I just put the sourdough in the oven too, so I've got like 40 minutes.